Let me carry that, sir. The paper bag was already tearing when Elena Frost saw the man struggling with it outside the corner store. She had just finished a 10-hour shift at the diner, her feet aching inside her worn shoes, her apron still tied around her waist because she had forgotten to take it off before stepping outside. She was tired. She wanted nothing more than to walk home, eat something warm, and fall asleep before her alarm dragged her back for another shift. But something about the sight in front of her made her stop. A tall man stood near a black car, holding 2 overflowing grocery bags with one arm, while trying to unlock his car door with the other hand. The bottom of one bag was giving way. An apple rolled out and bounced across the sidewalk. He did not notice. He was frowning at his phone, distracted, as if his mind was somewhere far away from groceries and torn paper bags. Elena crossed the street without thinking twice. "You're going to lose everything in that bag," she said, catching the apple before it rolled into the street. "Let me help you." The man looked up, startled. For a moment he simply stared at her, as though no one had spoken to him so plainly in a long time. His eyes were a deep, striking shade of gray, sharp and alert, but there was exhaustion behind them too, the kind of tiredness that came from carrying something heavier than groceries. "You don't have to do that," he said. His voice was low, controlled, the voice of someone used to being obeyed rather than helped. "I know I don't have to," Elena said, already reaching for the torn bag. "But your apples are rolling away, and honestly, watching you lose this battle is stressing me out more than my entire shift did." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by something that almost looked like the beginning of a smile, though he stopped it before it fully formed. "Fine," he said, "if you insist." "I do insist," Elena replied, already balancing the bag against her hip. "Where's your car?" He nodded toward the black car parked at the curb, sleek and clearly expensive, though Elena barely registered that detail. She was more focused on making sure a carton of eggs didn't crack against the pavement. They walked together in silence for a few steps, Elena adjusting her grip on the bag, the man watching her with quiet curiosity. "You're not from around here," Elena said, glancing at him. "I would have remembered a face like that." "I travel a lot," he said simply. "Business." "What kind of business makes a grown man lose a fight with a paper bag?" she teased. For the first time, he laughed. It was short, almost startled out of him, as though laughter was something he rarely allowed himself. "The kind of business that leaves very little time for grocery shopping," he said. "I usually have someone else handle this." "Well, today you have me," Elena said. "Consider it a limited time offer." They reached his car, and Elena helped him settle the bags safely on the back seat, making sure nothing else could roll free. When she straightened up, she noticed him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite place. Not suspicion, not curiosity exactly, but something quieter, something like relief. "Thank you," he said. "Truly." "It's just groceries," Elena said, waving a hand. "Don't make it weird." "I'm Kale," he said, extending a hand. "Elena," she replied, shaking it. His grip was firm but careful, as though he was holding back some part of his strength without thinking about it. "Well, Elena," Kale said, "you've saved my dinner tonight." "Try not to lose the next bag to gravity," she said, stepping back onto the sidewalk. "Some of us have jobs that don't involve dramatic showdowns with fruit." He smiled again, more fully this time, and something in his expression softened, as if her humor had chipped away at a wall he usually kept firmly in place. "I'll do my best," he said. Elena gave him a small wave and turned to continue her walk home, her tired feet suddenly feeling a little lighter. She did not think much of the encounter beyond a passing thought that the stranger had unusually intense eyes and an oddly formal way of speaking, like someone who spent more time giving orders than making small talk. She had no idea that the man she had just teased about losing a fight with groceries was Cale Ashran, the alpha king of the Silverwood Pack, a leader whose name commanded fear and respect across territories she didn't even know existed. She had no idea that beneath his composed exterior, Cale was exhausted not from grocery shopping, but from years of political tension, whispered betrayals, and the constant weight of leading a pack that was slowly fracturing from within. Cale watched her walk away until she turned the corner and disappeared from view. He stood by his car a moment longer than necessary, turning over the encounter in his mind. There was something remarkably ordinary about it, and that was exactly why it felt extraordinary. No one treated him like that anymore. No one joked with him, teased him, or offered help without expecting something in return. His entire world was built on hierarchy, respect, and calculated distance. And yet this woman, in a stained apron with tired eyes, had simply seen a man struggling with groceries and offered a hand. He got into his car, but instead of driving toward the private estate where his advisors were waiting for him with reports and disputes to resolve, he sat there for a long moment, staring at the diner sign across the street. Golden letters spelled out, "Miller's Diner," in cheerful, slightly faded paint. He recognized the uniform Elena had been wearing. A part of him knew he should drive straight to the Pack estate. Council meetings were waiting. Rivals were watching his every move, searching for any excuse to question his leadership. Distraction was dangerous in his position. But another part of him, a part he rarely allowed to speak louder than duty, wanted to sit in that diner and talk to the woman who had just made him laugh, for the first time in longer than he cared to admit. Meanwhile, at the Silverwood estate, in a wide room, lined with old maps and carved wooden furniture, 3 senior pack members waited for their king. Corwin, an aging beta with sharp eyes and sharper opinions, tapped his fingers impatiently against the table. "He's late again," Corwin said. "3rd time this week." "He has a lot on his mind," said Priya, a younger advisor whose loyalty to Kale was unwavering, though even she noticed the growing pattern. "A lot on his mind should mean he is here, handling pack matters," Corwin replied, "not disappearing into the human world without explanation." The third figure in the room, a broad-shouldered man named Dorian, said nothing, but his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Dorian had long harbored ambitions of his own, quiet and calculated, hidden behind a mask of loyalty. He had noticed Kale's absences too, and unlike Corwin, he was not simply annoyed, he was curious. Curious enough to start asking questions no one else had thought to ask yet. "Perhaps," Dorian said carefully, "our king has found something in the human world worth protecting." Corwin scoffed. "Nonsense. Kale has never been one for distractions." "Everyone has a weakness," Dorian replied smoothly. "Even kings." Priya shot him a warning look, but said nothing. She trusted Kale completely, but she also knew that trust alone would not be enough to protect him if his enemies discovered even the smallest crack in his focus. Back on the street outside the corner store, Elena walked the rest of the way home with a strange lightness in her steps. She passed the small park near her apartment, its swings creaking gently in the evening breeze, and found herself smiling, without entirely understanding why. It had been a small moment, nothing dramatic, nothing life-changing. Just a man, a torn grocery bag, and a bit of easy conversation. And yet something about it stayed with her. She reached her apartment building, climbed the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor, and let herself into her small but tidy apartment. The walls were decorated with old photographs, a few of her late mother, a few of friends from high school she rarely saw anymore. She dropped her bag by the door and sank onto the couch, finally allowing her exhaustion to catch up with her. As she closed her eyes, she thought briefly of the stranger's gray eyes, and his oddly formal way of thanking her, as though gratitude did not come easily to him. She wondered, just for a moment, if she would ever see him again. She had no way of knowing that across town, in a grand estate hidden behind iron gates and old trees, a king was thinking the very same thing about her. The following morning, Elena arrived at the diner earlier than usual, greeted by the familiar smell of coffee and bacon grease that always clung to the air no matter how many times the place was cleaned. Her manager, a stout woman named Marla, was already barking friendly orders at the morning cook. "Morning sunshine," Marla called out. "You look suspiciously well rested for someone who worked a double yesterday." "Must be the fresh air," Elena said, tying her apron. She spent the morning taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and chatting with regular customers, the rhythm of her work, as familiar and comforting as ever. She did not think much about the stranger from the night before, though every so often, a flicker of memory surfaced, the sound of his laugh, the way his eyes had softened when she teased him. She had no idea that later that same day, Kale would find himself unable to focus on pack matters, his mind drifting back to a torn grocery bag and a woman who had spoken to him as though he were simply a man, and not a king. For the first time in a long while, Kale Ashran felt something other than duty pulling at his attention, something warm and unfamiliar. something that made the weight on his shoulders feel just a little lighter. And though neither of them knew it yet, that small act of kindness on a quiet street corner had already set something much bigger into motion, something that would soon draw Elena into a world she never knew existed, and challenge Cale in ways his crown never had. For now, though, it was simply a memory, a pleasant, curious memory that refused to fade, tugging gently at both their thoughts as the day went on, quietly setting the stage for what was still to come. 3 days passed before Cale returned to Miller's diner. He told himself it was simply because the food was decent and the location was convenient, though even he did not fully believe his own reasoning. He parked his car across the street and walked inside with the calm, measured steps of a man used to commanding attention without asking for it. The bell above the door chimed softly. Elena looked up from behind the counter, and for a brief moment, surprise flickered across her face, before settling into a warm, easy smile. "Well, look who survived his groceries," she said, grabbing a menu. "Table for one, or are you here to challenge another paper bag to a fight?" "I thought I'd try my luck with a menu instead," Cale said, allowing himself a small smile as he took a seat near the window. Elena led him to a booth, sliding the menu across the table with practiced ease. "Coffee? Please." She returned a moment later with a steaming cup, setting it down in front of him with the same casual confidence she seemed to carry into everything she did. Cale found himself watching her more closely than he intended, noting the quiet efficiency in her movements, the way she balanced trays without looking at them, the way she greeted every customer by name, as though she genuinely remembered each one. "You come here often?" Cale asked, immediately feeling foolish for the obvious question. Elena raised an eyebrow. "I work here, so yes, you could say that." "Right," Cale said, "of course." "Are you always this smooth, or is today a special occasion?" she teased, pulling out her notepad. "What can I get you?" "Whatever you recommend," Cale said. "I trust your judgment more than the menu." Elena tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "Careful. That kind of trust usually gets people stuck with the meatloaf." "Is the meatloaf bad?" "The meatloaf is legendary," she said with mock seriousness, "for all the wrong reasons." Cale laughed, the sound surprising even himself. Something about her easy humor kept catching him off guard, pulling laughter out of him that he usually kept locked away behind layers of formality and control. "Then I'll trust you to steer me away from legendary disasters," he said. "Smart man," Elena replied, scribbling something onto her notepad, before heading back toward the kitchen. Cale watched her go, then turned his attention to the window, where the busy street outside carried on with its ordinary rhythm. It was such a plain, unremarkable scene, and yet Cale found a strange comfort in it, a stillness he rarely experienced in his own world. His phone buzzed against the table. A message from Priya, one of his most trusted advisors. "Council meeting moved to this afternoon. Corwin is asking questions about your schedule." Cale frowned slightly, sliding the phone back into his pocket without replying. He knew he should be more careful about where he spent his time, especially with tensions rising within his pack. But sitting in this small diner, waiting for a plate of food recommended by a woman who had no idea who he truly was, felt like the first real breath he had taken in months. Elena returned a few minutes later, setting down a plate of pancakes and eggs in front of him. "This isn't what I expected," Cale said, eyeing the plate. "Trust me," Elena said. "Breakfast food fixes everything. Bad day, good day, mysterious grocery bag disasters. Pancakes handle it all." Cale took a bite, and to his genuine surprise, it was good. Simple, warm, comforting in a way that felt entirely unfamiliar to him. "You were right," he admitted. "I usually am," Elena said with a grin, sliding into the empty seat across from him for a brief moment since the diner had quieted down. "So Cale, what exactly do you do that keeps you so busy you can't handle your own groceries?" Cale hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I manage a large organization. Lots of moving parts, lots of people who expect a great deal from me." "Sounds exhausting," Elena said. "It is," Cale admitted, surprising himself with his own honesty. "More than most people realize." "Well, for what it's worth," Elena said, "you looked a lot less exhausted after you finished laughing at my meatloaf joke." "That may be the nicest thing anyone has said to me in weeks," Cale said quietly, and though he said it lightly, there was a weight behind the words that Elena noticed but did not press. Well, that's just sad, she said gently. Everyone deserves at least one good laugh a week. Consider this your allotment. Cale smiled, something soft and genuine settling behind his eyes. Then I suppose I'll need to come back for my next allotment. I suppose you will, Elena said, standing as a new customer walked through the door. Same time next week? I might not wait that long, Cale said. Elena laughed, shaking her head as she walked away to greet the new arrival, leaving Cale alone with his pancakes and a strange, unfamiliar sense of contentment. He finished his meal slowly, in no hurry to leave, watching the diner's quiet rhythm continue around him. When he finally stood to pay, Elena waved him toward the counter with a smile. Come back soon, she said, and maybe next time, bring your own groceries so I don't have to save you twice. I'll do my best, Cale said, leaving a generous tip before stepping back out into the afternoon sun. As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Priya, this one more urgent. Corwin wants a full council session tomorrow. He's pushing hard. You need to be here. Cale sighed, sliding into the driver's seat. The weight of his responsibilities settled back onto his shoulders the moment he left the diner, but for the first time in a long while, it felt slightly more bearable, softened by the memory of easy laughter and pancakes recommended by a woman who had no idea just how much her simple kindness meant to him. He drove back toward the Silverwood estate, the iron gates rising ahead of him like a return to reality. Inside, the halls were quiet but tense, servants moving briskly, advisors speaking in low, urgent tones. Priya met him at the entrance, her expression tight with concern. Where have you been? She asked quietly, falling into step beside him. Handling something, Cale said simply. Corwin is convinced you're distracted, Priya said. And Dorian isn't helping matters. He's been asking questions, subtle ones, but questions nonetheless. Let them ask, Cale said. I have given no one reason to doubt my leadership. Not yet, Priya said carefully. But absences like this, especially unexplained ones, give ambitious men room to create doubt where none previously existed. Cale paused, considering her words. He knew Priya was right. His position had never been entirely secure. Not with the political tensions simmering beneath the surface of the pack, tensions that had existed long before he took the throne. Rivals were always watching, always waiting for a crack to exploit. And yet, despite the very real danger of neglecting his duties, Cale found himself unwilling to give up his visits to the diner entirely. There was something about Elena's presence, her humor, her complete unawareness of his true identity, that offered him a kind of freedom he had never known as a leader. For the first time, he was simply a man enjoying a cup of coffee and a plate of pancakes, not a ruler, burdened by expectation and suspicion. I'll be more careful, Cale said finally, though even as he said it, he knew it was only a partial promise. Priya studied him for a long moment, clearly unconvinced, but she said nothing further, simply nodding, before leading him toward the council chamber, where Corwin and Dorian were already waiting, their expressions carefully neutral, though their eyes carried questions Cale was not yet ready to answer. As the meeting began, Cale forced his attention back to pack matters, listening to reports on border disputes and resource allocation, offering measured responses and calm authority. But even as he spoke, some part of his mind lingered on a quiet diner across town, on pancakes and easy laughter, on a woman named Elena who had no idea that her small act of kindness had already begun to change the course of his carefully controlled life. Outside the council chamber, Dorian lingered near the window, watching Cale's car through the glass. He had noted the direction Cale had come from, the same direction as the previous unexplained absence. It was a small detail, easily overlooked by most, but Dorian was not most people. He filed the observation away carefully, patient and calculating, waiting for the right moment to use it. Whatever secret Cale was keeping, Dorian intended to uncover it, and he suspected that whatever it was, it would prove far more useful to his own ambitions than anyone currently realized. Weeks passed, and Cale's visits to Miller's diner became a quiet, steady rhythm neither of them spoke about directly, though both looked forward to it more than either would admit. He came on Tuesdays and Fridays, always sitting in the same booth by the window, always ordering whatever Elena suggested without question. Their conversations grew longer, drifting from playful teasing into deeper, more personal territory. One rainy afternoon, when the diner was nearly empty, and the rain drummed steadily against the windows, Elena slid into the booth across from Cale, during a lull in her shift, wrapping her hands around a cup of tea. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course," Cale replied. "You never talk about your family," Elena said, "or where you grew up, or really anything before. I don't know, 3 weeks ago, when you showed up outside a grocery store, fighting a losing battle with an apple." Cale's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something guarded crossing his features before he composed himself. "There isn't much to tell. My family is complicated. I was raised to lead, and leading doesn't leave much room for anything else." "That sounds lonely," Elena said softly. "It is," Cale admitted, surprising himself again with his honesty. Something about Elena made honesty easier than it had ever been. "What about you? Tell me about your family." Elena's expression softened, a mixture of warmth and old sadness passing over her face. "My mother raised me alone. She worked 2 jobs most of my childhood, cleaning houses during the day and waitressing at night, actually at this very diner. She used to bring me here after school, and I'd do my homework in this exact booth while she worked." "She sounds remarkable," Cale said. "She was," Elena said quietly. "She passed away 4 years ago. Cancer. It was quick, at least, if there's any mercy in that." "I'm sorry," Cale said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "Thank you," Elena said. "I took over her shifts here after she got sick, just to help pay for treatment, and I guess I just never left. It wasn't the plan, you know. I wanted to go back to school, study nursing maybe, something that actually helps people. But life had other plans." "It's not too late," Cale said. "For the nursing, I mean." Elena laughed softly, though there was no real humor in it. "Some days I believe that. Other days it feels like a dream I've outgrown." "Dreams don't have expiration dates," Cale said firmly. "Trust me, I know something about being trapped by expectations you never chose for yourself." Elena studied him closely, something curious and searching in her gaze. "You really don't talk about yourself much, do you?" "Not usually," Cale admitted. "Well," Elena said, standing as a customer waved for her attention, "for what it's worth, I like the version of you that shows up here. Whoever the rest of you is out there in that important, complicated life, this version seems like a good one." Cale watched her walk away, her words settling somewhere deep inside him, a place he had thought long closed off. He sat there for a long moment, staring at his cooling coffee, thinking about how easily she gave honesty, how effortlessly she offered comfort to a man she barely knew, a man whose entire identity was built on secrets she could never imagine. Later that evening, back at the Silverwood estate, Cale found himself unable to focus on the reports spread across his desk. Priya knocked softly before entering his study, carrying a folder of documents related to an upcoming border negotiation. "You seem distracted," she observed, setting the folder down. "I'm fine," Cale said, though the words lacked conviction. Priya studied him for a moment, then took a seat across from his desk, her expression softening from advisor to something closer to friend. "Cale, I've known you since we were children. I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" Cale asked. "Distracted. Softer. Somehow. Almost happy," Priya said carefully. "It's the woman, isn't it? The one from the diner." Cale's silence was answer enough. "Does she know?" Priya asked quietly. "About what you are? About who you really are?" "No," Cale said, "and I don't know how to tell her, or if I ever should." "You know the danger in this, Cale," Priya said gently. "Humans who become entangled with our world rarely stay safe for long, especially not humans connected to someone as visible as you. If Corwin or Dorian ever discovered her existence, they wouldn't hesitate to use her against you." Cale's jaw tightened at the thought. "I would never let that happen." "You may not have a choice," Priya said. "Not if this continues." Cale leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down harder than usual. He knew Priya was right. He knew the risks, understood them intimately, having grown up witnessing the political games and dangerous alliances that defined pack leadership. And yet, despite all logical reasoning, despite every warning bell sounding in his mind, he could not bring himself to stop seeing Elena. "I'll be careful," Cale said finally. "Please be more than careful," Priya said, her voice edged with genuine worry. "Be smart," For her sake as much as yours. Cale nodded, though his mind was already drifting back to a small diner booth, to warm tea and quiet confessions, to a woman who had somehow, without even trying, become the brightest part of his complicated, burdened life. Outside the estate, in a smaller private study across the compound, Dorian sat with two other pack members, who shared his growing suspicions about Cale's frequent absences. A map of the town lay spread across the table, a small red mark indicating the diner's location, information Dorian had quietly gathered over the past several weeks, through careful, patient observation. He's there almost every week now, Dorian said, tapping the map. Same diner, same schedule. It isn't business. This is something else. A woman? One of his companions asked. A human woman, Dorian confirmed, a slow, calculating smile spreading across his face. One our king seems remarkably attached to. How does this help us? The other companion asked. Patience, Dorian said smoothly. Every king has a weakness. Cale has just shown us his. The three men exchanged knowing glances, the weight of unspoken plans settling over the room like a shadow, while across town, unaware of the danger quietly gathering around her, Elena closed up the diner for the night, her thoughts lingering on gray eyes and quiet confessions, completely unaware of the storm her simple kindness had begun to summon. The council chamber at the Silverwood estate had never felt so tense. Cale sat at the head of the long wooden table, his posture straight, his expression carefully neutral, though inside he felt the weight of every pair of eyes fixed on him. Corwin stood near the far wall, arms crossed, his patience visibly thinning. 3 border skirmishes in the past month, Corwin said, his voice sharp. 2 trade disputes unresolved, and our king has been unreachable during critical hours on multiple occasions. Explain this to me, if you can. I have handled every matter brought before me, Corwin said evenly. Nothing has gone unresolved. Not without delay, Corwin pressed. A delay that weaker leaders would exploit. Dorian, seated near the middle of the table, said nothing at first, allowing Corwin's frustration to build the tension in the room, before speaking in his usual smooth, measured tone. Perhaps our king simply requires additional support. It's understandable, given the demands of leadership, if his attention has been divided lately. The comment was subtle, carefully worded, but Cale caught the underlying implication immediately. Dorian knew something, or at the very least, suspected something, and was testing the waters to see how Cale would react. My attention remains exactly where it needs to be, Cale said firmly, meeting Dorian's gaze directly. The Silverwood pack has never been stronger under my leadership, and it will remain that way. Of course, Dorian said smoothly, inclining his head in a gesture of respect that did not quite reach his eyes. I meant no disrespect, my king, only concern. The meeting continued for another hour, discussions shifting through border patrols, trade agreements, and internal disputes among lesser pack families. Cale handled each matter with practiced authority, but beneath his composed exterior, unease continued to build. Dorian's comment had planted a seed of doubt among the other council members, subtle enough to avoid direct accusation, but sharp enough to leave a lingering question in the air. After the meeting concluded, Priya caught up with Cale in the hallway, her expression grave. Dorian is testing you, she said quietly. He wouldn't have said something like that without reason. I'm aware, Cale said. You need to distance yourself from her, Priya said, at least until things settle. If Dorian discovers Elena's existence and connects her to your absences, he'll use it. You know he will. Cale's jaw tightened, frustration and worry warring within him. I understand the risk, Priya. I do, but I'm not ready to simply walk away. This isn't about being ready, Priya said, her voice firm but not unkind. This is about her safety. If Dorian sees an opportunity to weaken you, he will not hesitate to use an innocent human woman as leverage. You know exactly what our world is capable of. Cale said nothing, the truth of her words settling heavily over him. He had seen firsthand the ruthless political maneuvering that defined pack leadership, the alliances built and broken over perceived weaknesses, the lengths ambitious rivals would go to secure power. He had never imagined that someone as ordinary and unaware as Elena could become entangled in such danger, and the thought of her being harmed because of her connection to him filled him with a dread unlike anything he had experienced before. That evening, Cale drove to the diner, though his intention was different this time. He needed to see Elena, if only to reassure himself that she remained safe, unaware, untouched by the growing tension surrounding him. He found her behind the counter as usual, her smile brightening the moment she spotted him. "You look like you've had a rough day," Elena said, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter without waiting for him to ask. "It's been complicated," Cale admitted. "Business troubles?" Elena asked. "Something like that," Cale said, forcing a small smile, despite the tension coiled tightly in his chest. Elena studied him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "You know, you never really tell me what's actually bothering you. You just kind of dance around it." "It's complicated," Cale repeated. "Everything with you seems complicated," Elena said gently, though there was no accusation in her voice, only genuine curiosity and concern. "But for what it's worth, I'm a good listener, if you ever decide you want to actually talk instead of dance." Cale looked at her for a long moment, torn between the desire to share everything, the truth of who he was, the dangers surrounding them both, and the instinct to protect her by keeping her as far from that truth as possible. "Someday," Cale said quietly, "I might take you up on that." "I'll hold you to it," Elena said with a small smile, though something in his tone had shifted her light teasing into quiet concern. Cale stayed longer than usual that evening, watching her work, memorizing the easy rhythm of her movements, the warmth she carried into every interaction, the simple, unguarded kindness that had first drawn him to her weeks ago. When it was finally time to leave, he lingered by the door a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful," he said suddenly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Elena blinked, surprised. "Careful of what?" "Just, be careful," Cale repeated, forcing a reassuring smile despite the unease churning inside him. "The world can be unpredictable sometimes." "That's oddly specific," Elena said, studying him curiously. "Is everything okay, Cale?" "Everything's fine," he said, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "I just worry, that's all." Elena watched him leave, an uneasy feeling settling in her chest that she couldn't quite explain. There had been something different in his voice, something heavier than his usual quiet reserve, a warning, wrapped in vague reassurance, that left her more unsettled than comforted. Back at the estate, Cale found Priya waiting for him once again, her expression grave. "Dorian requested access to the Northern Patrol logs today," she said without preamble. "The same logs that would show exactly which roads lead toward the town where Elena lives and works." Cale's blood ran cold. "Did you grant access?" "I had no legitimate reason to refuse," Priya said. Denying him would only confirm his suspicions. Cale closed his eyes briefly, frustration and fear tightening around his chest like a vice. He had wanted so desperately to keep his two worlds separate, to protect the fragile, ordinary happiness he had found with Elena from the calculated ruthlessness of pack politics. But it was becoming increasingly clear that separation was no longer possible. "We need to accelerate our plans regarding Dorian," Cale said finally, his voice hardening with resolve. "If he intends to use Elena against me, I need to be prepared before he makes his move." "And what about her?" Priya asked. "Will you tell her the truth?" Cale was silent for a long moment, staring out the window, toward the distant lights of the town, where Elena was likely finishing her shift, unaware of the danger quietly closing in around her. "Soon," Cale said finally. "I'll tell her soon, before it's too late." But even as he said the words, a heavy, uncertain dread settled over him, the growing awareness that soon might not come quickly enough to protect the one person who had, without even trying, become the most important part of his carefully guarded life. Despite the warning bells sounding in the back of Cale's mind, his visits to Miller's diner continued, though he found himself glancing over his shoulder more often, scanning the street outside for anything unusual before entering. Elena noticed his heightened awareness, but said nothing directly, choosing instead to fill their conversations with the same warmth and humor that had always drawn him to her. On a quiet Thursday evening, after the last customers had left and Marla had gone home early with a headache, Elena locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed, though she left it unlocked for Cale, who was due to arrive any minute. She busied herself wiping down the counter, humming softly to herself, when the bell above the door chimed. "You're early," she said without turning around, assuming it was Cale. "Am I?" a voice replied, unfamiliar and smooth, sending an immediate chill down her spine. Elena turned quickly, finding a stranger standing just inside the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp, calculating eyes that swept over the diner with unsettling precision. Something about him felt wrong, dangerous, in a way she couldn't quite name. "We're closed," Elena said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "You'll have to come back tomorrow." "I'm not here for food," the stranger said, stepping further into the diner despite her words. "I'm looking for information about someone who visits here quite often. A man named Kale." Elena's stomach tightened, instinct warning her to be careful. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult my intelligence," the stranger said, his tone still smooth but edged with something colder now. "I know he's been here, regularly. I simply want to understand why." "I think you should leave," Elena said firmly, reaching for her phone beneath the counter. The stranger's eyes followed her movement, and for a brief, terrifying moment, something flickered behind his gaze, something inhuman and sharp, gone as quickly as it appeared. Elena blinked, uncertain if she had imagined it. "There's no need for that," the stranger said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I simply want answers. Tell me about your relationship with Kale, and I'll leave you in peace." Before Elena could respond, the bell above the door chimed again, and Kale stepped inside, his expression shifting instantly from casual ease to sharp, controlled alertness the moment he spotted the stranger standing near the counter. "Dorian," Kale said, his voice low and dangerous, in a way Elena had never heard before. "What are you doing here?" "Merely satisfying my curiosity, my king," Dorian said smoothly, though his eyes flicked briefly toward Elena, calculating and cold. "It seems you've made quite an interesting friend." "Leave," Kale said, his voice carrying an authority that made the air in the room feel suddenly heavier, though Elena couldn't quite understand why. Dorian smiled, unbothered, and inclined his head slightly. "Of course. We'll speak soon, Kale. I imagine we have quite a bit to discuss." He turned and left without another word, the bell chiming softly behind him as the door swung shut. Elena stood frozen behind the counter, her heart pounding, confusion and fear tangled together inside her. "Kale," she said slowly. "What was that? Who was that man? And why did he call you king?" Kale closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had wanted more time, wanted to choose the right moment to explain everything, but that choice had just been stolen from him. "Elena," he said quietly, "I think it's time I told you the truth." Elena crossed her arms, her fear slowly giving way to cautious determination. "Yes, I think it is." Kale walked toward the counter, taking a seat on one of the stools, his expression more vulnerable than Elena had ever seen it. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but I need you to trust me, at least long enough to hear the whole truth." "Okay," Elena said carefully, though unease still coiled tightly in her chest. "I'm not just a businessman," Kale began. "I lead an organization, yes, but it isn't the kind of organization you're imagining. I'm the leader, the king, of a community that most people don't even know exists. We're not entirely human, Elena. We're something else, something older." Elena stared at him, waiting for the joke, for some sign that he was simply testing her, but his expression remained deadly serious. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "I know this is difficult to believe," Kale said, "but that man who was just here, Dorian, he's part of my world too, and he's not someone who wishes me well. If he's found his way here, to you, it means he's discovered something he intends to use against me." "Use me, you mean?" Elena said, her voice sharpening with growing alarm. "You're saying I'm in danger because of you?" "Yes," Kale admitted, the honesty costing him visibly. "And I am so sorry, Elena. I never meant to put you at risk. I should have told you sooner, should have kept my distance the moment I realized how dangerous this could become for you, but I couldn't stay away." Elena stood in silence for a long moment, processing the impossible weight of everything Kale had just told her. Fear, confusion, and something else, something painfully close to betrayal, churned together inside her. "I need you to leave," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "Elena, please," Kale said. "I need time," Elena said, cutting him off. "This is too much, Kale. I don't even know what to believe right now, and I can't process it with you standing here." Kale nodded slowly, though the pain in his expression was unmistakable. I understand. But please, be careful. Lock your doors. Trust no one you don't already know well. I will make sure you're protected, even from a distance. He left without another word, the bell above the door chiming softly behind him, leaving Elena alone in the empty diner, her mind spinning with impossible truths, and a fear she couldn't fully understand, yet somehow knew was entirely real. She locked the door behind him, sinking onto a stool, staring blankly at the counter where, only weeks ago, she had simply been a waitress helping a stranger with his groceries, unaware that such a small act of kindness would lead her into a world of danger and secrets she never could have imagined. Elena did not sleep that night. She sat curled on her couch with every light in her apartment switched on, replaying the strange encounter over and over in her mind. The cold, calculating stranger, the flicker of something inhuman behind his eyes. And Kale, standing there afterward, calmly explaining that he was some kind of king, from a world she never knew existed. It sounded absurd. It sounded like the plot of a story someone had made up to frighten children. And yet, some deep, instinctive part of her believed every word, because it explained so much that had never quite made sense. His strange formality, his careful avoidance of personal questions, the subtle, dangerous authority in his voice when he had ordered Dorian to leave, an authority that had made the very air in the diner feel heavier. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones, but sleep remained impossible. She dragged herself through her shift at the diner, moving through familiar motions on autopilot, her mind elsewhere entirely. Marla noticed immediately. You look like you saw a ghost, Marla said, eyeing her with concern. Everything okay, sweetheart? Just tired, Elena said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She thought about calling someone, a friend, anyone who might help her make sense of what had happened, but who could she possibly tell? Who would believe a story about kings and hidden worlds without assuming she had lost her mind? The isolation of the secret pressed down on her almost as heavily as the fear itself. That evening, as she was closing the diner, a soft knock came at the door. She peered through the glass, relief and apprehension mixing together, when she recognized Kale standing outside, looking exhausted in a way she had never seen before, dark circles beneath his eyes, his usually composed posture slightly bowed under invisible weight. She unlocked the door and let him in, saying nothing at first, simply gesturing toward a booth. He sat down heavily, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. I've spent the entire day trying to figure out how to make this right, Kale said finally. And I don't think there's a version of this where I simply make it all disappear. I'm sorry, Elena. I should have told you the truth from the beginning, even if it meant losing whatever this has been between us. Why didn't you? Elena asked quietly. Because I was selfish, Kale admitted. You made me feel normal, ordinary, something I haven't felt in years. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, that feeling would disappear. Elena studied him for a long moment, her anger slowly softening into something more complicated, a tangled mixture of hurt, sympathy, and lingering fear. I need you to explain everything, all of it. No more half-truths. Kale nodded, and for the next hour, he explained as much as he could. He told her about the Silverwood Pack, about his role as their leader, about the delicate political tensions that constantly threatened his authority. He told her about Dorian's ambitions, about the very real danger that came with being connected to someone in Kale's position. So that man yesterday, Elena said slowly, processing everything. He wants to use me against you somehow. Yes, Kale said, and I won't lie to you and say the danger isn't real. It is, which is why I think, for your safety, we should stop seeing each other. The words hit harder than Elena expected, a sharp ache blooming in her chest despite everything. Is that really what you want? No, Kale admitted, his voice breaking slightly. It's the last thing I want. But wanting something and it being right are not always the same thing. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands, weighing fear against the undeniable connection she had felt with him since the very first day. An apple rolling across the sidewalk, an easy laugh shared between strangers. I'm scared, she admitted finally, but I don't think running away from this is actually going to keep me safe. If this Dorian person already knows about me, distance isn't going to erase that knowledge. Kale looked up at her, surprise and cautious hope flickering across his tired features. "Elena, I can't promise you safety. Not entirely. My world is dangerous in ways yours has never had to consider." "Then teach me," Elena said, a note of steel entering her voice, despite the fear still coursing through her. "Teach me enough to understand what I'm facing. I'd rather know the truth and face it directly than hide in ignorance and hope it goes away." Cale studied her for a long, quiet moment. Something like admiration mixing with the worry etched across his face. "You are the bravest person I have ever met." "I'm terrified," Elena said honestly. "Bravery and fear aren't opposites," Cale said softly. "Sometimes they exist in the very same breath." They sat together for a long while after that, Cale explaining more about his world, careful and thorough, answering every question Elena asked with patient honesty. She learned about the hierarchy of the pack, about ancient rivalries, about the delicate balance of power Cale had spent years carefully maintaining. It was overwhelming, frightening, and utterly unlike anything she had ever imagined existed beneath the surface of her ordinary life. But as the night wore on, something shifted between them, the fear slowly giving way to a fragile, growing trust. Elena realized that despite everything, despite the danger and impossibility of it all, she did not want to walk away from Cale. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. "We'll figure this out," Cale said finally, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside the diner's windows. "Together, if you're willing." "Together," Elena agreed, though the word carried a weight of uncertainty neither of them could fully predict. Neither realized, as they sat together in the quiet stillness of the early morning diner, that across town, Dorian was already setting the next phase of his plan into motion, confident that he had found exactly the weakness he needed to finally challenge Cale's throne. Dorian moved carefully over the following days, aware that a direct attack against Cale would only unite the council against him. Instead, he chose subtlety, planting doubts among lesser pack members, quietly suggesting that their king had grown distracted, perhaps even compromised, by an attachment to someone outside their world. He gathered two allies, minor but ambitious pack members named Reginald and Talon, both eager for greater influence, and easily persuaded by promises of reward once Dorian secured greater power within the council. "The human woman is the key," Dorian explained to them one evening, in the same private study where his plans had first taken shape. "If we can demonstrate that Cale's judgment is compromised by his connection to her, the council will have no choice but to question his leadership." "And if simply questioning his judgment isn't enough?" Talon asked. Dorian's smile was slow and calculating. "Then we make her presence impossible to ignore. A little pressure applied carefully can make even the strongest leader stumble." Meanwhile, Cale had begun quietly reinforcing protections around Elena, though he was careful to avoid drawing further attention. He arranged for a trusted pack member, a quiet, steady woman named Sable, to remain unobtrusively near the diner during Elena's shifts, watching for any sign of danger without revealing her true purpose. Elena, for her part, adjusted slowly to the strange new reality of her life. She continued working her shifts, continued her familiar routines, but beneath the surface, a constant undercurrent of awareness had settled into her, a heightened alertness to unfamiliar faces, unusual behavior, anything that might signal danger. One afternoon, as Elena walked home from her shift, she noticed a man following at a careful distance, his pace matching hers exactly whenever she slowed or quickened her steps. Her heart began to pound, memories of Dorian's cold, calculating presence flashing through her mind. She quickened her pace, pulling out her phone to call Cale, when a firm but gentle hand touched her shoulder from behind. She spun around, ready to defend herself, only to find Sable standing there, her expression calm and reassuring. "It's all right," Sable said quietly. "I'm here to help. Cale asked me to watch over you." "You scared me half to death," Elena said, exhaling shakily. "My apologies," Sable said. "That man behind you has been following you for the past several blocks. I've been keeping my distance, waiting to see his intentions before intervening." Elena glanced over her shoulder, spotting the same unfamiliar man from before, now standing awkwardly across the street, clearly uncertain about his next move, now that his presence had been noticed. "Who is he?" Elena asked. "One of Dorian's associates, I believe," Sable said grimly. "Come, let's get you somewhere safe. Cale needs to know about this immediately." They walked briskly to Elena's apartment, Sable remaining close beside her the entire way, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with practiced vigilance. Once safely inside, Sable made a quiet call, her voice low and urgent as she relayed the situation to Cale. Cale arrived within the hour, his expression tight with barely controlled anger and worry. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately, crossing the room to Elena's side. "I'm fine," Elena said, though her voice trembled slightly. "Shaken, but fine." "This confirms it," Cale said grimly, turning to Sable. "Dorian is moving forward, with whatever plan he's constructed. We need to act quickly." "What do we do?" Elena asked. Cale turned back to her, his expression softening slightly despite the tension coiled tightly within him. "I need to bring this before the full council. Expose Dorian's actions before he can manipulate the situation further in his favor. But doing so means revealing your existence publicly, Elena. Once the council knows about you, there's no going back to secrecy." Elena considered this for a long moment, fear and determination warring within her. If staying hidden isn't actually keeping me safe anyway, then maybe it's time to stop hiding altogether. Cale studied her, something like renewed respect deepening in his gaze. "Are you certain?" "No," Elena admitted honestly. "But I trust you, Cale. And I trust that whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Cale reached out, gently taking her hand, a small but significant gesture of solidarity between them. "Then we'll face the council together, tomorrow." That night, as Elena tried once again to sleep, despite the anxious energy thrumming through her, Cale remained awake in his study, carefully preparing for the confrontation ahead. He reviewed pack laws, precedents, and political strategies late into the night, determined to protect Elena and secure his own position simultaneously. Priya joined him near midnight, quietly setting a cup of tea on his desk. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly, "bringing this before the council directly. It removes Dorian's advantage of secrecy. It also exposes Elena to greater scrutiny," Cale said, worry evident in his tired voice. "I'm not entirely certain I'm making the right choice." "There may not be a perfectly right choice here," Priya said gently. "Only the choice that gives you both the best chance moving forward." Cale nodded slowly, drawing strength from her quiet reassurance. Tomorrow would bring challenges neither he nor Elena could fully predict. But for the first time since this entire situation began, Cale felt a resolute clarity settle over him. Whatever happened next, he would face it honestly, openly, and without the burden of secrecy that had shadowed everything since that very first meeting outside the grocery store. The council chamber had never felt so full of tension as it did the following morning. Word had spread quickly among the senior pack members that Cale intended to address a matter of significant importance, and the room buzzed with quiet speculation as they gathered around the long wooden table. Cale entered with measured, confident steps, Elena walking beside him, her chin held high despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Whispers rippled through the room at her presence, curious and wary glances following her every step. Corwin rose from his seat immediately, his expression a mixture of confusion and disapproval. "Cale, what is the meaning of bringing a human into this chamber?" "I intend to address rumors and accusations that have been circulating regarding my leadership," Cale said calmly, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Rumors, I believe, that originated from a deliberate and calculated attempt to undermine my position." Dorian, seated near the center of the table, maintained a carefully neutral expression, though his eyes flickered briefly toward Elena with poorly concealed calculation. "I'm not certain what you mean, my king. Surely you're not suggesting anyone here has acted against you." "I am suggesting exactly that," Cale said, turning his attention directly toward Dorian. "This is Elena. Yes, she is human. Yes, I have formed a connection with her, one I no longer intend to hide or apologize for. And yesterday, one of your associates followed her through town, clearly intending to intimidate or harm her in an effort to manipulate my judgment." Murmurs spread through the room, council members exchanging uncertain glances. Corwin's expression shifted from disapproval into something more calculating, sensing an opportunity to weigh the situation carefully before choosing a side. "These are serious accusations," Corwin said slowly. "Do you have proof?" "I have a witness," Cale said, gesturing toward Sable, who stepped forward from where she had been waiting near the chamber entrance. She recounted the events of the previous day clearly and precisely, describing the man who had followed Elena and his clear connection to Dorian's known associates. Dorian's composure remained largely intact, though a subtle tightening around his eyes betrayed his growing unease. "This is nothing more than circumstantial speculation," he said smoothly. "Perhaps the woman simply imagined a threat where none existed." "I did not imagine anything," Elena said firmly, stepping forward despite her nervousness. "I was followed, deliberately. And if your intention was to frighten me into disappearing quietly, you should know that it hasn't worked." A ripple of surprised murmurs spread through the room at her boldness, several council members exchanging impressed glances despite themselves. "She speaks well for a human," one older council member remarked quietly to his neighbor. Cale allowed a small, proud smile to touch his lips before returning his attention to the matter at hand. "Dorian, you have spent weeks quietly spreading doubt about my leadership, using unfounded suspicion to weaken confidence in my judgment. Yesterday's incident was simply the final piece of evidence needed to expose your intentions clearly." Dorian's calm finally cracked slightly, frustration flashing behind his eyes before he composed himself once more. "Even if what you're suggesting were true, my king, it changes nothing regarding the fundamental danger of your attachment to a human. She remains a vulnerability, regardless of my involvement. That vulnerability, as you call it, exists because of ambitious men like you," Cale said firmly, "not because of anything inherent in her presence. If anything, recent events have proven her resilience and courage far more thoroughly than they have proven any weakness." The council chamber fell into contemplative silence, the weight of Cale's words settling over the room. Corwin, ever pragmatic, finally spoke again. "Regardless of the political implications," Corwin said slowly, "attempting to intimidate an innocent human, particularly one connected to our king, represents a serious violation of pack law. If proven true, such actions cannot go unpunished." Dorian's associates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tide of council opinion beginning to shift away from their leader's careful manipulations. "I would like a formal investigation," Cale said firmly, "into Dorian's recent activities, including his associates' involvement in yesterday's incident. If found guilty of deliberately endangering an innocent life to further his own political ambitions, appropriate consequences must follow." The council murmured in agreement, several members nodding firmly, their earlier hesitation replaced by clear resolve. Dorian, recognizing the shifting tide against him, straightened his posture, though the calculating gleam in his eyes had dimmed considerably. "Very well," Dorian said tightly. "Let the investigation proceed. I have nothing to hide." "We shall see," Cale said evenly, though the quiet authority in his voice left little doubt regarding the eventual outcome. As the council session concluded, members slowly filed out, their expressions thoughtful, occasionally glancing toward Elena with newfound curiosity and respect. Priya approached quietly, a relieved smile touching her lips. "That went better than I expected," she said softly. "It's far from over," Cale said, watching Dorian's retreating figure with careful wariness. "But it's a start." Elena exhaled slowly, relief washing over her exhausted nerves. "Did we just win?" "We won today," Cale said, turning to her with a soft, genuine smile. "But men like Dorian rarely give up so easily." "Then we'll be ready," Elena said, determination steadying her voice despite the lingering exhaustion of the confrontation. Cale reached for her hand, a quiet, reassuring gesture amid the chaos of the morning. "Together. Together," Elena echoed, and for the first time since this entire journey began, she felt a small, steady flicker of hope settle within her, despite the uncertain challenges still waiting ahead. The investigation into Dorian's activities moved quickly once the council formally authorized it. Priya oversaw much of the process personally, determined to ensure fairness, while also protecting Cale's interests. Within days, evidence began surfacing that confirmed exactly what Cale had suspected all along. Reginald, one of Dorian's associates, proved far less loyal under pressure than Dorian had anticipated. Faced with the possibility of severe punishment, he quickly confessed to following Elena on Dorian's direct orders, revealing detailed plans that extended far beyond simple intimidation. He wanted to escalate things, Reginald admitted during his formal questioning, his voice trembling under the weight of his confession. The following was only meant to unsettle her, to make Cale doubt his own judgment, but Dorian mentioned considering more direct action if subtlety failed to produce results. Priya relayed this information to Kale immediately, her expression grave. He's more dangerous than we initially realized. If Reginald hadn't confessed, we might not have understood the full extent of his intentions. Kale's expression darkened with barely restrained anger. Where is Dorian now? Confined to his quarters, awaiting formal judgment, Priya said. Corwin insisted on strict confinement once Reginald's confession came to light. Even he recognizes the severity of what Dorian attempted. Kale nodded grimly, relief mixing uneasily with lingering anger. Elena, who had been present for much of the investigation's proceedings, reached out and gently touched his arm, offering silent reassurance. It's over, she said softly, isn't it? Formally soon, Kale said, some of the tension easing from his shoulders at her touch. Dorian will face judgment before the full council within days. Given the evidence against him, exile is the most likely outcome, perhaps even more severe consequences, depending on further findings. And after that? Elena asked. What happens to us? Kale turned to face her fully, his expression softening from the hardened authority of leadership into something gentler, more vulnerable. After that, Elena, I hope we simply get to continue what we started, without secrets, without the constant fear of discovery hanging over us. Elena smiled, though uncertainty still lingered in her eyes. This whole situation, it's shown me just how different our worlds really are. I'm not sure I fully understand everything yet, or that I ever completely will. You don't have to understand everything all at once, Kale said gently. I don't expect you to become an expert in pack politics overnight. I only hope you'll continue being willing to learn, and that you'll trust me enough to guide you through it. I trust you, Elena said, and she realized, as she said it, that she meant it completely, despite the whirlwind of danger and revelation of the past several weeks. But Kale, I need you to promise me something. Anything, Kale said. No more secrets, Elena said firmly. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges or dangers we face, I need you to be honest with me, from the very beginning. I can handle difficult truths. What I can't handle is being kept in the dark while decisions are made around me. I promise, Kale said solemnly, his voice carrying the same authority and sincerity she had come to trust deeply over the past weeks. No more secrets, Elena. Not from you. 3 days later, the council convened for Dorian's formal judgment. The chamber was packed, nearly every pack member of significant standing present to witness the proceedings. Dorian stood before the council, his usual calculated composure notably absent, replaced by a tense, defensive posture. Corwin, serving as the primary voice of judgment given his seniority, addressed Dorian directly. You have been found guilty of orchestrating deliberate intimidation against an innocent human, connected to our king, motivated entirely by personal ambition and political manipulation. Such actions constitute a severe violation of pack law and endanger the stability and reputation of our entire community. Dorian remained silent, his jaw tight, though he offered no further defense. Given the severity of these actions, Corwin continued, the council has decided upon permanent exile from Silverwood territory, effective immediately. You will surrender all titles, privileges, and connections to this pack, and you will not be permitted to return under any circumstances. The chamber remained silent as the judgment was delivered, the weight of the moment settling heavily over everyone present. Dorian's expression finally cracked, bitterness and anger flashing briefly before he composed himself one final time, offering a stiff, formal bow before being escorted from the chamber by 2 guards. Once Dorian had been removed, Kale rose to address the remaining council members, Elena standing quietly beside him, her presence no longer a secret, but rather a quiet symbol of the transparency Kale intended to bring to his leadership moving forward. This situation has taught us all a valuable lesson, Kale said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. That strength as a leader does not come from isolating oneself from genuine connection, but rather from facing challenges honestly, together, with those we trust. The council members nodded in solemn agreement, several offering respectful glances toward Elena, whose quiet courage throughout the ordeal had earned genuine respect among even the most skeptical pack members. As the session concluded and the chamber slowly emptied, Priya approached Kale and Elena with a warm, genuine smile. You did it, she said softly. Both of you. We did it together, Kale said, glancing toward Elena with quiet pride and affection. Elena smiled back, exhaustion and relief mingling together as the weight of the past several weeks finally began to lift from her shoulders. The danger, for now, had passed, but she understood clearly that this was only the beginning of a much larger journey, one filled with challenges and discoveries she could not yet fully predict, but one she now felt ready and willing to face. Weeks passed following Dorian's exile, and life within the Silverwood Pack gradually settled into a calmer, steadier rhythm. Kale's leadership, having weathered the crisis successfully, emerged stronger than before, respected not despite his connection to Elena, but in many ways because of the courage and honesty both had demonstrated throughout the ordeal. Elena continued working at Miller's Diner. Though her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined, that first evening she offered to help a stranger carry his groceries. She spent her days off exploring Kale's world more deeply, learning about pack customs, meeting members of his community who greeted her with growing warmth and acceptance. One quiet afternoon, as autumn leaves drifted lazily past the diner's windows, Elena sat in her usual booth during a break, sipping tea, while reviewing a course catalog she had picked up from the local community college. Kale arrived, sliding into the seat across from her, with the same easy familiarity that had marked their earliest meetings. "Nursing school?" he asked, glancing at the catalog with a warm smile. "I've been thinking about it," Elena admitted. "Actually applying this time, not just dreaming about it." "I think that's wonderful," Kale said sincerely. "What changed your mind?" Elena considered the question thoughtfully. "I guess facing everything we went through made me realize life is too short and too unpredictable to keep putting off the things that actually matter to me. If I can handle standing up to an ancient pack council, I think I can handle nursing school." Kale laughed softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I have no doubt you'll excel at whatever you choose to pursue." "Speaking of pursuing things," Elena said, a teasing note entering her voice, "how are things going with your council? Any more ambitious rivals I should know about?" "Things have been remarkably peaceful," Kale said. "Corwin, surprisingly, has become something of an ally since Dorian's exile. He respects strength and honesty, even if he doesn't always show it warmly." "High praise, coming from you," Elena teased. "I've learned to appreciate directness," Kale said, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You've taught me quite a bit about that, actually." Elena smiled, warmth spreading through her chest at his words. Their relationship had grown steadily stronger over the past weeks, built now on a foundation of honesty rather than hidden secrets, each of them learning to navigate the complexities of merging two vastly different worlds into something workable, something real. "Can I ask you something?" Kale said, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more serious. "Of course," Elena replied, setting down her tea. "I know things have moved quickly, and I know the world I come from is complicated, sometimes dangerous," Kale said carefully, "but I find myself unable to imagine continuing this journey without you fully beside me, not just as someone I visit at a diner, but as someone who shares my life completely." Elena's breath caught slightly, understanding the weight behind his words even before he continued. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer," Kale said gently, "but I want you to know, clearly and honestly, that my intentions toward you are serious. Whatever comes next in my life, whatever challenges or responsibilities I face as king, I want you there beside me, if you're willing." Elena studied him for a long moment, her heart swelling with emotions she had been carefully processing over the past several weeks. She thought about the frightened uncertainty of that first confrontation with Dorian, the exhausting political tension of the council chamber, the quiet, steady courage Kale had shown throughout every challenge they faced together. "I've thought about this a lot," Elena said finally, "about what it would mean to fully step into your world. It's terrifying, honestly, but every time I think about walking away, about going back to a simpler life without you in it, I realize that simpler isn't the same as better." "So what are you saying?" Kale asked softly, hope evident in his voice. "I'm saying yes," Elena said, a warm, genuine smile spreading across her face. "I'm ready to walk fully into this life with you, Kale. Not because it's easy or safe, but because I trust you, and because being with you, even amid all the complications and dangers, feels more right than anything else I've ever known." Kale's expression softened into pure, unguarded joy, a rare and beautiful sight that Elena had come to treasure deeply over their weeks together. He leaned across the table, pressing a gentle, grateful kiss to her forehead. "Thank you," he said softly, "for seeing past the crown, past the politics and danger, and choosing to see simply me." "Thank you," Elena replied, "for trusting me enough to let me in, even when it would have been easier to keep me at a distance." Outside the diner, autumn leaves continued their quiet dance along the sidewalk, the same sidewalk where, months earlier, Elena had first noticed a stranger struggling with a torn grocery bag, unaware that such a simple act of kindness would lead her into a life far bigger and more extraordinary than anything she had previously imagined. As the diner's evening rush began to pick up around them, Elena rose to return to her shift, pausing only to glance back at Cale with a warm, promising smile. "Same time next week?" she asked, echoing the same playful question from their very first meeting weeks ago. Cale smiled, watching her walk away with quiet admiration and deep, abiding affection. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," he said softly. "Not even for an entire kingdom." And as Elena returned to her work, carrying trays and refilling coffee cups with the same warmth and easy confidence that had first caught Cale's attention months ago, neither of them doubted, even for a moment, that whatever challenges still lay ahead, they would face them exactly as they had learned to face everything since that very first day, together, honestly, and without fear of the truth between them.